Hi, my name is Donna Bales. I am from the Canadian Regulatory Technology Association. I'm here today to talk about Canadian perspectives on Regtech opportunities. And first of all, I really want to thank FinTech Taipei for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here and to share some insights. So today we've got 20 minutes. So what I really want to accomplish is I want to give you a sense of the Canadian landscape, tell you a little bit about our association, and then delve into 5 major themes that I think are transparent in the Canadian market right now. So just to get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Canadian Regtech Association. So we're a not-for-profit. We started at the beginning of 2019, and our mandate is to bring 3 key stakeholders together: the financial institutions, the Regtech firms, and the regulators and policymakers, and work together and collaborate on opportunities within the Regtech ecosystem. So we want to really spur growth and innovation and to raise the bar in terms of standards. So last year was all about a building year, building awareness of the association. But this year, we are growing from strength to strength. The landscape, in a way, current landscape with COVID and the changes that it's created on the market structure have actually been good for our organization. And we're building the member community. We've recently gained members with the cloud service providers. We've got 2 new Canadian domestic banks as members, and also 2 of the major consulting firms. So in the last 4 or 5 months, we've been really working on trying to get a good understanding of the Canadian landscape. And we've been doing this through a couple of ways. First of all, in terms of we wanted to try to understand what are the financial institutions, where are they at in terms of Regtech adoption? So we have put out a survey. It was a very simple survey, 20 questions, and we haven't quite published it yet, but I wanted to share a few insights today. And that's what this slide's all about. Here, from a very top level, we're seeing that about 30% of technology spend within the Canadian FIs is actually dedicated to Regtech. And it's anticipated to grow in the next 12 months. So I see this as a significant insight. And then in terms of who is actually leading the charge in terms of Regtech, the survey showed that it's really the legal and compliance teams and executive management. This is actually, to me, a very telling insight because for 2 reasons. Executive management shows that there is a real strong tone at the top, which is very good for innovation generally. But also, if you're a Regtech firm, it gives you a little insight about the time it might take to actually sell your solution in an organization. Because even though you might be talking to a very senior person within the business and compliance team, it may actually have to go up a level to get approval. We also then wanted to understand, what is the level of adoption across different types of Regtech categories. So one of the things we did, and this slide actually will be fairly difficult for you to read right now on the screen, but the PowerPoint will be available afterwards. But what we did is we created a Regtech taxonomy. And the purpose of the taxonomy was to categorize different types. And you may have seen a similar type of taxonomy from one of the consulting firms or one of the other Regtech associations. But we use those examples to help build ours. And we really look forward to working with other Regtech associations to actually build this out further. But what this did is it created a framework. So when we were doing the survey, it helped us structure the results. So when we looked at adoption across the categories, so categories like compliance management, risk management, information management, we found out that most of the adoption is taking place in risk management and financial crime and at the second line of defense. So looking at the three pillars within a regulatory change management framework, most of the adoption is at the second level. In terms of technology, what type of technology are firms using? Are they using biometrics? Are they using blockchain? Are they using artificial intelligence? Actually, what we found is that cloud computing and robotic process automation is the most widely used across all the Regtech categories, and that artificial intelligence is being adopted at the risk level and the compliance management level. Of course, artificial intelligence is being well used for business purposes for many organizations. And then we also found that what's keeping the executives up at night is privacy. Data privacy is one of the key issues we're having here in Canada. So that's sort of looking at that one pillar. And then we wanted to understand, what are Regtech firms in Canada doing, and what is the dispersion amongst our taxonomy? So we did some of our in-house research, and we identified that there's probably about 75 or so, and counting really, Regtech firms in Canada. And what we did is we mapped them against our taxonomy. This slide kind of shows you some of the results of this mapping. This is not 75 firms, it's actually about 45. We like a good Regtech association, wanted to make sure we had consent from all the firms before we actually display it publicly. But this sort of displays about 45 of the firms, and you can see there's quite a well dispersion in different categories. The financial crime category is a little underrepresented. There are actually several more financial crime Regtech firms within Canada. In terms of what regulators are doing, we're finding that they are embracing our association and regulatory technology more and more. We have regulators sitting as members within the association, and we're also seeing them sitting actually on panels and participating. One of the security regulators, the Quebec regulator, the AMF, have also started proving out some concepts. So one of the initiatives that they've been working on is they were testing out using natural language processing. One of the applications that is a requirement is for issuers to provide information into the regulator in unstructured format. And what they did is they took that information and they normalized it, and they actually created a translation tool. In Canada, we're actually a dual language country, and so this was a very effective tool to take that information, translate it, and make things much more efficient. I mean, for us as an association, we attempt to have a dual language website. We're not as successful as we'd like to be, but this is the type of tool. And so it's actually like a very, very simple application, but has significant benefit for the industry. So that is sort of an overview of the landscape from the three key stakeholders, the FIs, the Regtech firms, and the regulators. And now I wanted to delve into some of the opportunities, trends, and challenges that we see here. And this is by no means comprehensive. There's a lot going on in the Regtech space. Like, you imagine if 30% of the overall technology spend is in Regtech, there's a significant activity. So I wanted to just go through these themes. So one of the trends that we're seeing is a movement towards more dynamic risk management. And what I mean by this is that I think that operational risk frameworks and enterprise risk frameworks are quite mature. But what COVID has unearthed is that there was some new risks, more like business as usual risks, like in terms of converting to a remote workforce and what that means for access and deployment. And it created changes that were needed for the risk management framework. And we feel that this is sort of an ongoing challenge, that firms will need to be more, these risk assessments and these risk frameworks will have to be much more agile going forward in order to be operationally resilient. So that's sort of the first theme. The second theme is a movement towards ethical artificial intelligence. So as I discussed earlier, we are seeing more application of artificial intelligence for compliance and risk management. But there are considerations and risks that underlie that. So for example, bias risk or explainability risk, because if you are using a model, you need to, and you want to obtain a certain customer outcome, you have to make sure that it is, that you can explain that outcome. So there are a lot of ethical issues around the application of artificial intelligence. And we're seeing that organizations here in Canada are working on centers of excellence. They're working on updating their validation and monitoring tools to actually embed trust into their models. So this is a really, really key area. We wrote a paper about this, and it will be an area that we will continue to follow. And there's actually quite a few underlying considerations with artificial intelligence, because you need to be clear about the data risk that underpins the actual model. And also there are some cultural challenges, like this is sort of a new way of doing things, and just trying to adapt to a culture where you are thinking about ethics and trust all along the product life cycle is new for a lot of organizations. The next trend and challenge here in Canada we're seeing is data protection and privacy. And I mean, this is not uncommon. We're seeing this across the world. Obviously, GDPR is already implemented, but here in Canada, we're still working on legislation changes. So at the federal level, and then also at the provincial level. So for example, the province of Quebec has put forth a bill, Bill 64, and it is very, there are a lot of provisions in it that I would say are GDPR-like. Both legislations propose enforcement and quite significant changes to where the legislation stands right now. So to give you an example, administration penalty under the Quebec the Quebec legislation is up to the 10 million mark, whereas currently it's at the 10,000 mark. So that's quite a significant change. And I think this area is so very, very important because privacy and data protection underpins a lot of Regtech applications. So if you think about market integrity and trade surveillance, there's a underlying privacy element, like in terms of how like that trade information is processed, how it's stored, and how it's investigated. And so that level of trust has to be there, you know, and developed within your risk management and your research practices. And then, of course, there's a huge element around privacy in terms of for financial crime. So a very, very big area and very important and very evolving here in Canada. No surprise that financial crime prevention is on the list. This is something that throughout the world, you know, this is a area of focus. I think in terms of COVID, you know, here in Canada, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's risks within AML in terms of real estate and virtual assets and digital wallet. But I think the most, it's quite telling the trends that we're seeing in payments, how payments are distributed now is quite fascinating. And FinTech, which is our regulator for anti-money laundering, has put forward quite a few interesting statistics showing, like, you know, the dispersion of casino payments have obviously gone down. Large value transactions have unfortunately gone down because we've seen, you know, businesses fold or slow down. And so these trends are quite interesting. And what it means for firms is they need to be looking more closely at how they're managing their control framework, how they're adjusting their transaction monitoring to these shifts. So this is obviously a very important area, and you know, I spoke about earlier is that we're seeing technology taking a fairly large role in this category. The final theme I wanted to talk about was compliance management. This is probably, I mean, it's more a foundational element in Regtech, but it has such wide implications because there's so many regulations now. I think there's over 1,000 in Canada, and you know, depending on your size of a firm, you can have millions of regulations that you need to track and monitor. So this is actually quite big. We did a session on this actually yesterday that will soon be up on our website. But you know, we are really seeing more adoption of technology for this purpose. We did a poll in the event, and it showed that 47% are actively working on their regulatory change management technology framework, and a significant group is also, you know, focusing on, you know, mapping the controls and making that more systematic. So another really important area. So those were sort of the five main trends I wanted to cover today. And the last slide, you are not going to be able to read very well. It's very small, but it's more a takeaway for those who want to follow up on this presentation. This was these were our predictions from our advisors and our board at the beginning of the year on where we think 2020 is going. I think we've all had, you know, had our expectations of 2020 shattered in certain ways, but there are some really good insights in these predictions that I think is worth looking at. So that's all the time we have for today. And I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some insights from Canada. I want to thank FinTech Taipei for having me, and have a great day.